Peace to everyone. There is a very specific reason why I'm making this video. Now, if you love genealogy, you love family history, you really need to do it correctly. You got to do your due diligence. I have cousins who are like my second cousins who took whatever records they found on the internet or whatever leafs that pop up on Ancestry, and they just accept. Next thing you know, our great-grandmother, Effie McKillop, Scott, she was in Scotland at one point, and she owned property there, or something to that effect, which is total BS. I had to kind of tell my cousin this, okay? She was building up her tree on Ancestry using all the, every single suggestion that they made. Now, I specifically avoid doing that. Do you know why? Well, in case it isn't obvious, it's because you get the wrong records. You get the wrong individuals. And as a result, you're building up a fake family tree. Okay? Now, why do I bring all this up? Okay? For the second time now, the first time being back around 2011-ish, while I was living in Oklahoma. And now here we are in 2026. Okay? 15 years later. This is now a second individual who believes themselves to be descendants of the same Knight family that I belong to. Now, my third great-grandfather, Jacob Knight, he was a judge. He was part of the Muskogee Nation government, and he probably was the Miko of Arbika town. I don't know for sure, but he probably was. He had siblings that were part of the House of Kings. Now, he had half-brothers, and he had half-siblings and full siblings. Jackson Knight was a half-sibling, same dad, different mom. The moms could have been sisters. He definitely was married to them simultaneously, given the fact that the staggering of the ages of all of his siblings, of his children that were half-siblings, okay? Now, my third great-grandfather, he likewise had two wives simultaneous. Ironically enough, one of these purported descendants of Andrew Jackson Knight probably mistakenly believed herself to be a descendant of, Jackson Knight, thinking that Jackson Knight was either the same as Andrew Jackson Knight or the father of. She sent me information I no longer have. I believe it was from the OU website, or is that OU or OSU? There's these pioneer accounts that mentioned Jacob Knight. And that's how I know for sure that he had these two wives at the same time. So I mean, you'll meet people who are doing research who might come across records related to you and your family, but not actually related to them like they think they are. Strange but true. Okay. Now, this guy that I've been chatting with for about 24 hours, on and off. First, he posts something on the Porch Band Facebook group. Now, I'm not a member of the Porch Band, and I have my opinions about the Porch Band from a government standpoint, from a legitimacy standpoint, as far as how many of them are actually even Creeks versus being Catawba or whatever else. Okay, and of course, all the stuff from Ojibwa, Hickory Ground, the desecrations. I have a lot of opinions about these things that are negative. I also know there's good people from the Porch Band and who are not down with all this stuff. And I also know there's obvious corruption in Porch Band, because you cannot get on unless your parents are, and even if your parents are citizens, you may not be able to get on. Their blood quantums are all messed up. They have William Weatherford listed as a full blood. That guy was 1/8, just like me. And yet they have him listed as a full blood so they could build up their blood quantum. They have a specific list of ancestors that you can trace back to be a citizen of their tribe and have a blood quantum. I can only assume that some of the Rollins that I've seen that are actually kind of dark complected probably have Catawba in them rather than Creek. I know that Calvin McGee was trying to bring in some other Indians who weren't actually Creek to basically bolster their numbers and to probably give more of an actual native appearance, phenotype to what would become the Porch Band. Okay. So this individual has this belief based upon the internet genealogy that he did, or that he found, that Jackson Knight, someone had his wife listed as his mother. Okay. They had some messed up stuff going on here, and this guy was trying to get Muscogee Nation citizenship. I just had to break the bad news to him in the last hour here that that's not going to happen. One, if his ancestors stayed back in Alabama, like he says, he's not going to get Muscogee Nation citizenship, because if you want to be a citizen of the tribe, then you have to, your ancestors had to either show up in 1828 with the old settlers or show up during the Trail of Tears. Okay. If your ancestors stayed behind and never did the self-immigration, because there were some self-immigrants as well afterwards, if you're not from any of these groups I just mentioned, you are not going to acquire Muscogee Nation citizenship. Okay. You will have to be content with being a descendant, or pray that the Porch Band opens up its rolls. Okay. Because you are a descendant of their ancestors, not those who migrated east to Oklahoma. Okay. So I'm having this conversation with this possible cousin of mine, who now I know for sure is not my cousin. He tried to add me on Facebook. Before I start adding people, I got to get to know you better. And in this particular context, trying to prove that you're even my cousin, I'm probably not going to accept the friend request. Okay. Actually, he said he tried to friend request me and it didn't work. And I don't have a request from him. I got a friend request from somebody from high school right now, funny enough. But anyway, if you want to prove your lineage, and then someone else who also claimed descent from the same people was using the same bad family tree. I'm like, do you have any documentation that could back up any of this stuff? She's like, oh no, my father, gave me up as a child, didn't want anything to do with me, sad face. It's like, okay, that sucks and all. I don't mean to be heartless. Can you prove your ancestry? Do you have any documentation? Because if you don't, then you're purely speculating that these people are your actual relatives. Pure speculation, 100% pure speculation. Even if some of them manage to be your ancestors, it is pure speculation until you either have the documents or you can prove relation to someone who owns the documents, who has a common ancestry back to these people. Okay. So you're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to maybe shell out some cash for some documents. Now, a lot of Dawes roll stuff can be found online. Now, whether it be the final Dawes or whether it be the Campbell Creek roll or earlier rolls, there are scans of microfiche printouts that you can get of all these rolls. Now, it's up to you to try to connect the dots. Now, you're going to want to use the final Dawes to trace back to the 1882, the 1895, anything before then. And you're also going to need to probably have certain documents like, proof of heirship from the Lowell Creek payroll and the Lowell Creek claim documents. You're going to want that stuff. And even that has errors in it. And you can prove the errors. You can correct the errors. I've been able to. But I'm just saying, like, there's a lot of people that don't know how to do this stuff. It's kind of like in a recent video I mentioned how there's a lot of ignorant African Americans who think that, they were the original Creeks and the original this and that, and how all natives originally look black. And that there's this black super race that existed in ancient times, and that somehow there's a super civilization that was then conquered by whites, Asians, and everybody else, and that somehow displaced them and systematically eradicated all proof of their existence. Yet they, with their last dying breath, they're going to believe all this stuff, right? You have that kind of stuff going on. Okay. That is a far more extreme example than what I'm referring to here in relation to those who are speculating on their ancestry. But they have this idea. You got people in this porch group and others saying, I'm not sure if I'm really even native. I thought I heard I was, and da 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 da. And it's all this stuff. It's just like blah, 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 blah. Do you have the documents? If you do not have the documents, you are not an Indian. Oh, but that's just the white man's way, and da, 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 da. No. You are a pretendian until you can prove your ancestry. Okay? You are not a real Indian unless you got the documents. I know it's very harsh. People don't want to hear that, but it's true. If you have our blood, you can prove it with documents. DNA is not going to work unless you're connecting yourself to a biological father who is Indian when your mother is not, and you're trying to prove this guy who's on the rolls is in fact your father. And if you can do that, well, maybe then you can become a citizen, because now it's a matter of legal fact that he is your father. Okay? That could be done. But this whole, oh yeah, you got to see how much Indian blood you have, the percentage back to, no. All that percentage crap is meaningless. And it's notoriously inaccurate. I mean, you got people that are proven to be blood relatives that still show up with different percentages of native, different percentages of whatever else that they mutually share as a matter of fact. Provable fact by documentation and by genetics that they have, they still end up with different percentages. Okay? So DNA is not going to be admissible to gain tribal citizenship. So since Porch Band has closed its rolls, and sometimes even the children of current people that are enrolled can't become citizens, unless you're already in, you're not going to get in until they open the rolls up and decide. And they're not going to open them up until it's time for the grandkids who can't currently get on. When it's their turn to get on, they'll open the rolls for them. They're not going to open up for everybody else because they're a bunch of corrupt assholes. Okay, I'm sorry, but it's true. If they can dig up Indian graves and build a casino on top of that and then pretend they have a vibrant Muskogee culture that they've stolen and bought from us, then yeah, they'll keep the rest of their second, third, fourth cousins that are very multiple times first, second, and third cousins, mind you, because there is a lot of inbreeding among them. They'll keep them off the rolls, but they'll make sure their own descendants make it onto the rolls. Okay? They will do nepotism. They will do that because that's who they are. Okay? It's disgusting to me. It really is. But you're not going to get onto the Muskogee Nation of Oklahoma rolls unless you are a descendant of those who actually moved to Oklahoma. I would say, let's just say between 1828 and before 1861, okay? Because again, there were some self-immigrants after the Trail of Tears during the late 1830s. I think even before the Trail of Tears, definitely before the Trail of Tears as well. But afterwards, and even in the 1840s, I think maybe even 1850s, I'd have to double check that though. But you have a bunch of self-immigrants who made it over and they became citizens, or you might say they retained their original citizenship within the nation. So anyway, that's it for now. But I want you all to know, you got to prove your Indian heritage through documentation. You got to prove by documentation that anybody is your ancestor. You can't just say, oh, I know for sure this is it, or grandpa told me this. No. You need to prove it. You got to prove it. There's got to be some measure of proof on that. Do good research. Do not rely on crappy family trees you find on the internet, because a lot of that stuff is bad. I've become far less trusting of a lot of this stuff. I've been doing genealogy online for the last 26, 27 years. And I know the pitfalls. I know the misinformation. You got people claiming, "Oh, I'm a descendant of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and here's the family tree," and you're like, "No, you're not. There's no proof of that." Well, there's no proof that it isn't. It's like, that's not the same. Okay? There's no proof that it's not. Well, then fine, I'm a descendant of Zeus and Apollo and whatever else, because, well, you can't prove that I'm not. Okay? So cut the bullshit. Okay? Do good research. Okay? And don't just believe whatever you hear on the internet or whatever all your friends and family think it's so cool that you're a descendant of a princess. So you're a princess too. No, you're not. You're not a king. You're not a prince. You're not a princess or a queen or any of that stuff unless you are actually the next in line. There's so many descendants of these people. We're all descended from European royalty, pretty much. That does not make me a nobleman. And I can prove a bunch of lines. Okay? So I'm just a regular guy who happens to have some of that blood. Okay? That does not make me special. So let's be real about that. All right. Enough ranting for now. Let all this stuff sink in. Do your research. And I'll talk to you next time. Mado, Hadam Chichat, please.